somebody volunteer, we do the due diligence. We look up on LinkedIn who they are they legit, are they serious? And when I read her profile, I almost had a heart attack. And the reason is because I have a shelf full of genetics books, and I've myself taken genetics tests, and one of the many reasons why I love the All Souls trilogy is because the genetics and the biology and the geneticists in the books. So, you know, Shelli and I got on the phone and we talked about volunteering, and I asked her a few questions about, you know, what she did for a living, and she explained that she was a professor at the University of Alabama. She's a professor of molecular biology. It's like, oh my God. I had a fangirl moment on the phone with her. Yeah, I did. Karen knows. And after I spoke with her, like very timidly asked, like, hey, would you consider actually speaking at the conference? And she said yes. Like, so I literally felt that I won the lottery. And so it's really a fantastic treat to have her. I think you're gonna love her presentation. And so without further ado, please welcome Professor Shelli Carter.
The person who fangirled after that conversation was me. All right, so Laura just relayed our first conversation, and it went much longer than either one of us expected, the least of which was because we kept talking about my favorite topic in the world, which is science. Yes, ma'am. Yes, I will stand closer to the mic. And the hardest part about agreeing to do this was narrowing down what to talk about, because I am in complete and total awe of Deb and how well she relates my favorite field of biology in these books. So ultimately, Laura and I did decide to keep it to the narrowest possible topic and restrict ourselves largely to the first book, A Discovery of Witches. And so I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the topic of mitochondrial DNA today. And so some of you in the room have wondered, no doubt, are you a descendant of witches? And mitochondrial DNA is one of the ways that you could determine that, but we'll have to defer to Deb on what the profiles actually look like. So my favorite scene in the book, or the one that really, really hooked me into the series, was the first time that Diana visited Matthew's lab. That took me back to fond memories of being in grad school. And for anyone that has gone to grad school, fond memories are few and far between. So first off, what are mitochondria? Mitochondria are these little things that are frequently called the powerhouse of the cell. They are absolutely essential in a certain type of cell, which are the cells that make up our bodies, and they make up the structure of what we think of as life forms, like bigger life forms, trees, plants, animals, all those kinds of things. Those are eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells have lots of compartments in them. Each of those compartments does something special. One of those is the mitochondria. So because I am an educator, I couldn't give the talk without at least showing you what they look like. It's a very basic drawing. We will get into why they're so great as a tool for forensics, but just to frame what we're talking about. In animals, and this is not the case in all organisms, but in mammals in particular, mitochondria come exclusively from the maternal cell, the egg. So this is just a graphic, and so we've got the much bigger egg. We do have mitochondria in the sperm of mammals. Provide energy. That's sperm need to move, they need to swim, they have quite a few mitochondria. But the way that fertilization works in mammal cells, once the sperm enters the tail, actually is hacked off the mechanism in the cell. And in the process of doing that, it cuts off the part of the tail that has all the mitochondria in it. Sometimes mitochondria do get in which case they are then targeted and degraded within the egg. So largely, barring an accident, barring a couple of mitochondria slipping through the cracks, you only have mitochondria from the maternal lineage in mammal cells. Deb covers that in her work much more simply, but again, that is literally how it works. So Diana's in the lab the first time, she's looking around, they're explaining how things work, and they show her a graphic, and she makes the comment in the book about these brightly colored hoops. Scientists are very visual, and this is actually how we represent the mitochondrial genome. The fact that it is a hoop is not just a visual thing. The DNA of mitochondria is actually circular. That contributes a lot to its usefulness. I'll get to that in just a few moments. But when we say brightly colored hoop, it's because the different regions of the genome have been color-coded. Now, for the purpose of forensic identification and the way that Matthew and Miriam and Marcus were using the genome, they are focusing in that control region, or the D loop, up at the top. Because in that area, that's non-coding area. And we all know how the trilogy takes on the topic of non-coding DNA. Non-coding DNA, because it doesn't have a specific function in the cell or in the organism, there is no evolutionary pressure for it to maintain exactly the same. If there's a sequence of DNA that needs to do something in a cell, it needs to stay the exact same copy every time. So cells put a lot of energy and time into maintaining the fidelity of that copy. So making sure every time the DNA is duplicated, it's an exact same sequence. Non-coding regions, or regions that don't have a specific function, don't need that same fidelity. So the cell can conserve energy by not being so rigorous in the photocopying process of a variable region. Some regions tend to develop more mutations. For a variety of reasons, I'll whiteboard that for you later if you want. But those regions in particular tend to be called hypervariable regions. And hypervariable regions are excellent tools for forensic-based identification using DNA sequences. So, what is mitochondrial DNA specifically? Again, it's a very resilient structure. It's circular. Being circular, it's automatically more protected from the environmental degradation. The DNA that's in your nucleus, the nuclear DNA that's discussed in the work, that's not in a circular form. It tends to be knotted up like threads that have gotten tangled. There's other things going on, but it's not circular. That circular shape in and of itself is protective, so that's a good thing. It's also inside the mitochondria, which is inside the larger cell, so it's doubly protected from environmental issues and damage. Sorry, I can't see, I'm short. There also are multiple copies, okay? So every cell has multiple mitochondria in it. Every mitochondrion has multiple copies of that circular DNA in it. That is opposed to your nuclear genome, where you're only going to have really one copy. It's just in the nucleus. You have one nucleus per cell. So automatically we have a larger sample size when we're looking at mitochondrial DNA, which helps when using it as a tool for forensics. Later on in the book, we learn that witches hide their DNA. They're not deliberately doing that. You know, that's a topic of conversation between Isabeau and Martin, Matthew, and Diana about how Diana in her morning ritual gets rid of her hair down the drain, all those kinds of fun things. It's very, very relevant when you start talking about DNA. So again, I already mentioned DNA in general is a useful tool, but mitochondrial DNA is particularly useful for forensics. It's in nearly every cell in a person's body. It is not in red blood cells, it's not in platelets. But other than those two types of cells in the blood, you're going to find mitochondrial DNA in every cell. That is different from nuclear DNA. There are quite a few cells that do not have nuclear DNA. It is it's relatively easy to obtain from degraded and very old remains. So we've already talked about how more resilient it is, how more protected it is from the environment because it's in that double layer protection, being inside an organelle, inside the larger cell. It's also easy to obtain in samples that people naturally leave behind in their environment. That in particular is going to be hair. If you've ever watched CSI, you've probably seen them collecting hair from the hairbrush, those kinds of things. Really, the only DNA that you're going to get from a hair sample is going to be mitochondrial DNA unless you look up and you have a hair follicle. Then you can get nuclear DNA. But the cells that are in the shaft of the hair, in the the process of the hair growing, the hair becoming keratinized, they have jettisoned their nuclear DNA and have hardened, but they do not jettison their mitochondria. So we have mitochondria, we have this great resource, we can get to it relatively easy compared to nuclear samples. How do scientists actually use it? When we're talking about forensics, it can be used on different scales. So first off, we can look at very large-scale relationships with mitochondrial DNA. In all of the eukaryotes, so most things that we think of as living organisms, even though our little friends the bacteria are there, but they're not the same kind of cell, we really only have 6 main mitochondrial genomes. So you can look all across plants, animals, fungi, and structure how life evolved on a very, very grand scale by looking at mitochondrial genomes. We also know we can talk about female lineages, and we're going to move into that in just a few moments. And then the other thing that we can do and have done is it can be used in human identification, forensics. And the first very notable case of this was in the World Trade Center disaster. Samples that were so damaged from that catastrophe could not isolate nuclear DNA. They were able to isolate mitochondrial DNA and at least begin to triage some of the unidentified remains. Then they could contact family members and get more appropriate samples to do more precise level identification. So this idea of female lineages. Well, now you guys have the basic biology to understand why that happens. It only comes from the eggs. We know that. So everyone really only has one possible source of their mitochondria, as opposed to their nuclear DNA, which is going to be a mix of both parents. So when we are trying to analyze larger patterns, while more data is always great, as Miriam says in the Book of Life, sometimes you don't need too much data. So being able to half the possible sources of your DNA does make it easier to structure and understand some relationships. And that's why we may want to look at only a single lineage, the female lineage in this case. That also leads us to some of the problems of mitochondrial DNA, and that takes us to the topic of clans. And I'm going kind of fast, you guys, so if you have questions, feel free to start asking them now. Otherwise, there will be plenty of time at the end of the talk for questions. But we hear Miriam and Marcus discussing this idea of clans and the idea of clan mothers. So what does that mean? Well, scientists have used mitochondrial DNA, again, for many years. And because it's easier to analyze just that single lineage, they have more quickly been able to develop what's known as regional variation in humans. And so this graphic is just showing you a mixture of the predominant haplotypes of mitochondrial sequences in humans. They're just labeled A through Z based off when they were found, really. It doesn't have anything to do with their age at this point in time. But you can see haplotypes are present in different regional areas of the globe, which allows us to begin to develop what is known as biogeographical ancestry. So where did a particular person's people come from originally? We also can trace human migration patterns, which allows us to understand the evolution of humans and where significant changes came in Homo sapiens, where they likely originated from in Africa, and then how humanity migrated around the rest of the globe as the current modern human species. Now, if anyone has ever looked at Deb's recommended reading list, she references a book called The 7 Daughters of Eve by Brian Sykes. This is an image from that text. I highly recommend that book. I love it myself. He does a great job of explaining the early days of developing this idea of clan lineages in humans. But it's also great because it's a nice mix of nonfiction and fiction. So he goes through the basic science, how the lineages were developed, and then he kind of puts on his creative historian hat and he writes an origin story for the clan mothers. Now his focus is on the 7 major European clan mothers, because he is a European himself. But the reason I like this text in particular, besides the way it explains the science, I think you really begin to grasp when you're reading those historical stories the age disparity in clan mothers. So clan mothers were not all alive at the same time, And importantly, clan mothers were not the only women alive at that time. They just happened to be the only lineages that are currently surviving. Takes us to the idea of old clans. It's going to move us into the idea of how clans disappear. So, Miriam makes reference to the idea of a molecular clock. Molecular clocks are based off mutation rates. So I already alluded to the fact that if a sequence of DNA is supposed to be doing something, you really, really need that copy to stay the same. Cells put a lot of time and effort into that. There's a lot of proofreading. There's a lot of redundancy in how the copies are made, but it still doesn't work perfectly. Nothing works perfectly. So we do have mutations that show up in coding regions of DNA. They're thought to be a major factor in evolution in particular. But you can think of it, for example, we have A blood type, B blood type, O blood type. That all has to do with a difference in a coding region of DNA. Then we have the non-coding DNA. The non-coding DNA doesn't have that pressure to stay exactly the same on the same scale. See mutations developing more rapidly there, which can be used to calculate mutation rates based fundamentally off the number of differences we see between two comparative sequences and what we know is the average mutation rate calculated in generational time. Time is basically how many cycles has that DNA been copied. That then can get translated to real time, but the translation gets a little iffy. Plus, there are a lot of, you can have a mutation one way, and there's no reason to say that you can't have another mutation that takes it back. Okay, so back to the original sequence. Mutations aren't necessarily directed. So because of this variability, we do come up with molecular clocks that show a lot of fluctuation in their time, but largely we can develop a rough idea of how many years, be it hundreds, be it thousands, even be it millions of years, have passed between two lineages splitting or two species developing, as the case may be. So, lineages split. As soon as lineages split, they both proceed at their own pace, doing their own thing, and we run into a math problem very quickly. So, let's do some math first. You. How many people contributed to you? Well, going back only 10 generations, over 1,000 people were necessary for you to be in this room. So think about how many DNA sequences are now represented just in you. Or think about, conversely, how many DNA sequences could have been lost in the process to get to you. Also, I just have to include this graphic because Deb makes the wonderful point in the Book of Life that we are all really related. If you do the math out, generational time, how many people it takes to contribute, if you go from you here, and this graphic was done in 2011, down to the 1400s, in order to get to you, you would have needed over 1 billion people. But the world population in 1400 was only 450 million. So that means that we are, in fact, all related, probably a couple of times over. Welcome to the South. I am a Southerner. I can make these jokes. Okay. So what that really is telling us, though, is that is explaining how a lineage can disappear. Okay, so in this color-coded graphic, you can see it more reasonably. We have, oops, wrong button. You guys just saw the end of the talk. So we have this color code at the top. Each of those is a different lineage. The men are grayed out because, sorry guys, but when we're talking about mitochondria, you guys don't matter. So we have all these different lineages, and in only, 5 generations, we have lost 10 lineages. Again, mitochondria only comes from the mother. So the only thing that needs to happen is you only have male children, you have female children that don't survive to adulthood, you have one female who maybe has multiple husbands, as we see the Bishop lineage had done previously. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, even though that was a very unique mix of nuclear DNA in each of those offspring, it's only one mitochondrial lineage in all of those offspring. So it does not take long to begin to lose lineages. So we hear Marcus saying to Diana, and we can assume Sarah, though they don't actually have Sarah's test results, that the lineage that Diana and Sarah represent, that's the first time they've seen it. They have not seen that particular clan mother sequence before in mitochondrial DNA. They've been studying this for a long time. They've got hundreds of witch samples. So it is a lineage in the process of dying out, will disappear if Diana doesn't have offspring. And then that takes us to the twins. So, and that's it, actually. So there's plenty of time for questions. It doesn't have to be just about mitochondrial DNA, but I will warn you, if you go too far out, I'll either need a whiteboard or I'll have to make it up. So. Okay, let's not be stumped. Come on. Oh, Jean.
You know, I'm full of questions. With respect to the trilogy,
Yes.
how does Deb has very specific mutations that break off to each of the types of creatures. How does the mitochondrial DNA tie into that?
So Deb doesn't have specific mutations for the different creatures. She has different chromosomal compositions. So really, vampires should not have a unique mitochondrial lineage because they're all humans to begin with. So they're going to have their human mitochondrial sequence. She explains how there is the hypermutation leading to the formation of the new nuclear chromosome, but not the mitochondrials. Or we can assume, well, at this point in time, I'm assuming there's no mitochondrial change. Could be wrong, could be. Witches will have their own unique mitochondrial sequence. Demons should, because based off the single additional chromosome, the non-paired, my speculation is that demons probably can't reproduce. Well, demons can't, or no one should be able to reproduce outside their species unless it's a situation like a blood rage vampire and a witch. Deb, don't correct me on that. No. But if you think about it, because you're going to have a chromosomal mismatch. Like if a witch is attempting to reproduce with a human, the witch chromosome doesn't have anything to partner with. Normally, that's a lethal condition. Not always, but normally.
You just gave me a follow-up.
Okay.
Which raises the question of Stephen Proctor. They thought his mother was human.
They did?
Or that it was mentioned that his mother was human.
Okay, so, well, there's the Weaver factor. I don't
Okay,
really know how we can account for the Weaver factor. Now, there are cases where, in humans, normally you have 23 pairs of chromosomes. We know that the witches have an extra pair, vampires end up with the vampire pair when they're made a vampire, demons have just the single chromosome, so not a pair. In humans, the only time it's not lethal if you don't have paired chromosomes is in sex chromosomes. So chromosomes 1 through 23, you must have 2 copies. In female humans, you have 2 copies of your X. In male humans, you have an X and a Y. So this automatically in humans. Okay.
I have a clarification question for you about mtDNA.
Sure.
So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it properly. So the only way that an mtDNA sequence could die out is if there's either too many mutations that cause it to change enough from its basis clan mother, or if that mother does not have viable children that can carry on the clan lineage.
Yes, so if a clan mother's lineage stops having females or stops having females that reproduce, yes. However, you are correct. A new mutation that then is subsequently passed on to enough offspring, that would generate a new clan mother. That's why the clan mothers aren't all at the same historical age. So they talk about Clan Hay being very old, Clan, I don't remember the other terms Deb uses, but the other clans, they all have different ages. Some of them are newer versus others. So the newer clan mothers are the result of mutation events that happen later.
But you can't trace them back to the original.
No, you can. You still could trace them back, because assuming you haven't had what's known as a back mutation. See, you can see here how these clan mothers are sequenced. So, for example, and this is where the pointer would be really handy. If you look there in Laura, who's kind of in the middle, it's an orange and yellowish hash circle. There are other offshoots from that. All of the offshoots would still have the mutation that indicated they came from Laura, but then they would have other additional mutations.
Thank you.
You've been waiting longer. Sorry, I'm going to let Janelle go. And plus, you read my cards for me, and she's awesome. So,
So, I actually have two questions.
okay, step up. There you go.
Are we sure that it's an old clan, hey? Or is it a new mutation and Diana is unique that old worlds and new ones begin?
This goes to this conversation. If it was a new mutation, they still would find the other mutations from the other clan, from the clan lineage it came from.
Okay.
So because it doesn't have any of those other mutations, it has to be an older one.
And Marcus and Miriam, when they say they've never seen it before, they are still saying they have seen enough of whatever is in. I didn't read that detail into it, so that's why I was confused.
Okay.
The second one, the question is that at the very end, humans and creatures, the witches, the daemons, the vampire, they're all related. And the only reason why you get the blood rage is because of the demon DNA. So they are interbreeding. Or you couldn't have demon DNA with humans.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the other question that I had genetically was, what makes the first vampire genetically? If vampires are always making the blood rage as a result of getting a human with demon DNA, then you're saying that they're intermingling, but then, and witches are witches because of their DNA, and
Right.
demons are demon because of their non-coding DNA, then what makes the first vampire genetically?
So I think my speculation on that is Deb is leading us down the path because she has Miriam discuss, for example, the remains from I believe he's a syphilis patient. There is evidence from historical remains of infections causing sudden hyper responses in DNA. So we could speculate something like that happened that resulted in a hyper response that basically all of what we think of as the vampire genes clumped onto a new chromosomal structure.
So my question is, so Diana is a chimera.
Uh-huh.
Is it possible that her ovaries are producing what should have been her brother's genetics? And is in fact the clan going to continue on if in fact it's passing on his, even though it's in a female?
So he would have the same mitochondrial sequence that she would because they have the same mother.
Okay.
So it's, now in terms of the chimera part, so that's an interesting question. It's possible that her ovaries would still have, possible but tricky. I really need a whiteboard for that one. So let me think of how to explain this. Who's ever heard that all calico cats are female? It's not 100% true, but there is a genetic basis to that statement. It's almost always true. And the times that it's not true, it's because the cat has a very unique mutation that's made it a male. So what, I alluded to this with Jean's question. All women in this room and other mammals that use two X chromosomes to determine sex, we have two X chromosomes. All the males are going to have an X and a Y. The Y chromosome carries genes that only make a person male. The X chromosome is not just about being female. X chromosomes carry a lot of genes that do other things. For example, they encode some of the color receptors in the eyes. So everybody has to have an X. if you're a female and you have 2 copies of the X, then basically you would have double the amount of gene product. That's actually not the way the biology works, because men can't have double the amount of gene product because they don't have the second chromosome. So what happens in mammals is something called X inactivation. Very early in development, one X chromosome in the pair is randomly chosen to be shut down. Okay? It happens, I forget what cell stage it is, but it's pretty early, but it's a multi-cell state already, so the X that's shut down is not the same in all of those cells. It's randomly turned off. The reason why all calico cats are females, really what that statement should say is all calico cats have 2 X chromosomes, is because the gene that controls the color patches of the fur is on the X chromosome in cats. So when it's shut off, sometimes the one that's going to make them orange is shut off, and sometimes the one that's going to make them black is shut off. As a result of that, you get patches of color. Where was I going with that? What did you ask me? Huh? Oh, about the chimeras. Okay, so in theory, if we took that idea, depending, vanishing twin syndrome happens very, very early in development. So it would depend on how early in development that had happened in the case of Diana and her twin, as to whether or not any of the cells that were her twins ended up in her ovaries. But even as I talk through this, it wouldn't matter because he was male, so the reproduction wouldn't work. So no.
Sorry, she couldn't be one of those females that are XXY.
She would not be XXY because XXYs are almost always infertile. Because XXY, well, that's true, it could, but yeah. XXYs are generally, because XXYs are generally infertile, they're also generally phenotypically male because they have the Y, and the Y is not going to get shut off. All right. Yep, come on up. If you've got questions, just start wandering up to the microphone, and then we'll just take it as there. Huh? Vanishing twins. Okay, so what about vanishing twins? And then I'll get your question. Yes, it happens. It happens very early in development. One of the fetuses is generally non-viable, and it happens so early that the tissue is basically harvested, for lack of a better term. You will get genetic sequence, so that's how they detect that she's a chimera, but you don't usually get tissue that's distinguishable. So, okay, yes?
How do you determine the original age of the mtDNA? Like the clan?
A
the
clan,
I'm
okay,
sorry,
it's
the clan.
based off the number of mutations. So the molecular clock is based off the rate at which one mutation occurs. So if you compare sequences, you say, there's 5 mutations different, so we can extrapolate they are this distant from each other.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Roll Tide.
That's right, roll tide.
I've read that trauma can impact DNA.
Yes.
And so I was wondering if you could speak to how that affects mtDNA and how that might affect the power of witches and the stability of demons.
I don't know that I could do that one. So what you're talking about is similar to the idea of imprinting. Imprinting occurs on nuclear DNA. I actually don't know that they have identified it on mitochondrial DNA.
Okay.
Mainly because the only way that you can determine imprinting has occurred is by looking at chemical tags that are on the DNA later on. And because you don't have 2 different sequences to compare, because the mitochondrial genome is all going to be the same, you wouldn't actually be able to determine where the difference in the tagging was.
Completely.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
I like you. Hey. No.
How would mitochondrial diseases play into the different clan theory?
Say that one more time.
How do mitochondrial diseases play into clan theory?
Mitochondrial
Diseases and disorders.
diseases into clan theories. Okay, so they actually don't have anything to do with clan theories. Mitochondrial diseases are caused by mutation in coding regions. So those are the areas that need to do something. When they don't work correctly, there's a mutation that happens, you get a disease in most cases. You can, in theory, develop clocks off of coding mutations, but because there's such pressure for them to be stable, they're not accurate. There's not enough changes to develop a reliable clock. So clan lineages, molecular clocks are almost always, but not always, based off non-coding changes.
So Sophie Norman, right, is
Yes.
a demon, but she's the daughter of two witches. How would you explain how that might happen?
What happened there is something that's called a non-disjunction event. So normally in reproduction, so we all have 2 copies, chromosomes, one from each parent. In order to get that, what happens when the eggs and the sperm are developing, the number of copies of chromosomes has to be halved. So you have just 1 copy of each chromosome in an egg. Another egg has 1 copy of each chromosome, all that kind of thing. So then when an egg and a sperm fuse, you're back to having 2 copies. During the process of eggs and sperm developing, when the cell is dividing the DNA, sometimes the pieces don't get divided correctly. And that's called a non-disjunction event. So there would be, for example, 1 egg that maybe has 2 copies of chromosome 21, and another egg that got no copies of chromosome 21. Then during fertilization, if in humans, if you only have 1 copy of chromosomes 1 through 23, it's lethal. But in some cases, you can get by with multiple copies of a chromosome. For example, that's what trisomy 21 is. That's 3 copies of chromosome 21. That leads to what we know of as Down syndrome. So my guess is that witches could give birth to a demon in the event of a non-disjunction event because 1 egg or sperm was missing the witch chromosome.
Right, and then would that be like, would the non-disjuncture also be why Sophie and Nathaniel were able to have a witch as a child?
Yes, because then their individual copies of the demon chromosome could have combined and would be a functional pair.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Susan from Austin, Texas, and I've been sitting here actually amazed at this crowd, okay? And I couldn't leave here without stating, I'm 64 years old, and I love these books, okay? These are fabulous books. But what I've gotten out of being here today is a science lesson that is phenomenal. And watching these young ladies get up here and have dialogues about science, that is phenomenal. Okay. This conference, I came here thinking, oh, we'll just celebrate how wonderful these books are, okay? And how fun we have reading them. But I am leaving here with an impression of what the power of women in this world is and what we can do, and that science and that what Deborah has brought to these books in educating people in things I would never learn about. This was impossible, okay? So I want to thank you very much for this presentation and thank all of you for bringing something to this conference that I never dreamed possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we've got about 5 minutes-ish left if anyone has any other questions. I know I am keeping you guys from Deb, but she's all right, Laura's got... Laura asked me tough questions, yeah.
No, this is actually super easy.
Oh.
As a scientist reading these books, how many science fangirls moment did you have?
I cannot begin to tell you, not the least of which, as I said in the lovely interview that the 10th Knot published, the scientists never get to be this sexy in most books.
Lori Ann, I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan. My question is about dominance. So brown eyes are more dominant than blue eyes, or maybe I got that backwards.
No,
But-
I'm
okay,
just,
But,
geneticists hate that example, but go ahead.
but, what's more dominant, the vampires, witches, or demons?
Okay, so I can actually answer that question using your brown eye versus blue eye example. We teach that in very basic biology classes because it's a very obvious thing. People know right away. You know, brown eyes, blue eyes. Yeah, you got green, you got some other things, but brown and blue is very obvious. Actually, eye color, hair color, any host of features in most organisms are in fact multigenetic. So they're not controlled by a single gene. Skin color is a very great example. I don't know if anyone has seen the article about two twins, I believe they're from the UK, who have mixed race parents, and one of them is as white as the Scotch Irish up here, and the other one is quite a bit darker and looks like the other parent. They're twins, okay? They have almost the same genetics, but because of the multigenetic or the polygenetic, however you want to, we don't know how many genes actually control skin color. So my guess is that between vampire versus witch, it's more of a multigenetic thing. It's very hard to say this is dominant over that. It's similar to the differences in blood rage, on how of the blood rage regions you have as to how severe your case is. You have another one? You're as bad as Jean. Yeah.
I think this is going to be useful for the audience.
Okay.
I've taken genetic tests. I was curious about my mitochondrial DNA, and I'm wondering if, without endorsing anybody, are there tests that you recommend if we are curious about our genes?
Sure. So we actually were discussing this a little bit at lunch. There are a host of companies that commercially sell, DNA kits. There's Ancestry, there's 23andMe, there's a whole variety of them. I'm not really going to necessarily say any of them are superior in terms of science. They're usually each working off their own unique markers because, again, we have a whole host of DNA to work with. If I were to purchase one myself, which I have not done, I actually would look at a company known as Helix, like the double helix. Helix is not themselves a genetic testing company. What they are, they're billing themselves as basically a DNA app. So they have partnered with a very large sequencing company. You send in your DNA to them once, they actually sequence your entire genome. They hold it in a repository. You then pick, okay, I want this type of test, or hey, this brand new test just came up. I want to see what my results are on that. The heavy lifting and the expense of DNA test is in that initial genome sequencing. So if you go with Helix, you go back to them, 5 years later, and you say, I want this new test. And like, okay, it's only $20 because we've already sequenced your DNA. We just need to run it through the computer looking for the new markers. So if you were going to do it now and you were thinking long term, because there are constant new genetic markers being identified, new tests coming into play, I would go with Helix because you would probably have the longest life out of that. Yes.
My name is Amelia. I'm from Memphis, but I just saw a post from a non-attendee. Her name is Sarah Jones.
Yes.
And her wish was that someone would ask this question. What your thoughts are on Diana's first pregnancy and the likelihood of a possible genetic component to the miscarriage?
That's probably extremely likely. So the vast majority of miscarriages that occur, so first off, the vast majority of miscarriages that occur actually occur before a woman even knows that she's pregnant, and it is almost always due to gross chromosomal abnormalities. We can assume with the unique genetics of a weaver and a blood rage vampire that probably there were some significant chromosomal issues. So I would be willing to put money on it. That's what drove it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question from Twitter.
Question from Twitter.
Are you a demon, vampire, or witch?
Anybody want to guess?
Vampire.
I'm a vampire.
Why?
Why? No, I would. I don't know if I want to answer the why. No. Vampires do keep secrets. Vampires are all about knowing things. Good answer. So. All right. Anything else? Okay. Has Deb snuck in yet, so she can come up here? Oop. That's me. I had to time keep myself, so. Yeah, so I have 2 minutes. I don't sing or dance. Anybody got one last question while we wait for Deb to come in? Because she's supposed to be here at 1:50. So. I don't know, actually, because I haven't kept up with the literature. Let's go back to the graphic. We can count. The question was, how many clans do they know about right now? That's a fairly accurate representation, if anybody wants to count them. No. His book is focused on the European clan mothers, but this is a complete map of human clan mothers. Yes, off there in the top corner where there's a little gray arrow, that leads off to mitochondrial Eve. But you don't need to put her there because everything comes from her, so she doesn't really need to be on the graphic. What about A Wrinkle in Time? I have read it, of course. Oh my God, you're talking about Charles Wallace and his little mitochondrial people. No. So there are a lot of mitochondrial diseases. Some of them do connect to the breathing conditions that we see Charles Wallace having. I'm sorry. Where they go with that now, that is tainted by that horror that was the first Star Wars. When they talk about midichlorians, that's all I can think about is the little mitochondrial people in A Wrinkle of Time. And here's the lady we're waiting for.
Isn't she supposed to be here? I'm like, okay, I'm here. Hi.
So I wanted to thank Shelli. Are you available?
Yes. Woohoo! There's still a lot of biology to cover, so yes.
So Shelli, are you available for the next 10 conventions?
That was wonderful.
So here's another proof that she's a demon. Karen and I had the perfect introduction with the pole. It was perfectly choreographed. She totally stole our thunder.
No, you stole our thunder when you said you're a demon. We had like the skit, everything, but it's fine. Okay, so, well, without much further ado, we welcome the one, the only, our fearless leader, Deborah Harkness. Okay, so before I start, I just want us to give one huge round of applause to Laura and Karen. When Laura and Karen approached me for the first con, I literally thought, I got off the phone and I called Jill and I said, they want to have a con, and I'm really worried because I think like maybe 15 people will come. And it was bigger than that, and then like it just keeps growing and growing, and it's pretty amazing when two people volunteer and pull together a whole bunch of volunteers to throw a party, and more than 1,400 people from around the world show up for it. labor of love. Is going to the Bodleian this year. So you're all, anything that hasn't gone into the actual, you sitting here at these tables, goes to a good cause. And these women do it all for you and out of love for the books and the characters. And what a privilege and a pleasure it is for all of us to have them working so hard on our behalf. So once again, big thanks to Laura and Karen. All right. Okay, so as you guys all know, it's the real-time read. And today's real-time reading chapter is chapter 6. So I'm going to start by reading a little, guys. And I don't know, is the fan who made this for me? All of them busy with their own work and completely oblivious to the creature convention around them. Envious of their ignorance, I took up a manuscript, determined to concentrate, but instead found myself reviewing my conversation in Blackwell's and the events of the past few days. On an immediate level, the illustrations in Ashmole 782 didn't seem related to what Agatha Wilson had said the book was about. And if Matthew Claremont and the demon were so interested in the manuscript, why didn't they request it? I closed my eyes, recalling the details of my encounter with the manuscript and trying to make some pattern of the events of the past few days by emptying my mind and imagining the problem as a jigsaw puzzle sitting on a white table, then arranging the colorful shapes. But no matter where they were placed, no clear picture emerged. Frustrated, I pushed my chair away from my desk and walked towards the exit. Any requests? Sean asked as he took the manuscripts from my arms. I handed him a bunch of freshly filled out call slips. He smiled at the stack's thickness, but didn't say a word. Before leaving, I needed to do two things. The first was a matter of simple courtesy. I wasn't sure how they'd done it, but the vampires had kept me from being distracted by an endless stream of creatures in the Selden End. Witches and vampires didn't often have occasion to thank one another, but Claremont had protected me twice in 2 days. I was determined not to be ungrateful or bigoted like Sarah and her friends in the Madison Coven. Professor Claremont? The vampire looked up. Thank you, I said simply, meeting his gaze and holding it until he looked away. You're welcome, he murmured, a note of surprise in his voice. The second was more calculated. If Matthew Claremont needed me, I needed him too. I wanted him to tell me why Ashmole 782 was attracting attention. Perhaps you should call me Diana, I said quickly before I lost my nerve. Matthew Claremont smiled. My heart stopped beating for a fraction of a second. This was not the small, polite smile with which I was now familiar. His lips curved toward his eyes, making his whole face sparkle. God, he was beautiful, I thought again, slightly dazzled. All right, he said softly, but then you must call me Matthew. I nodded in agreement, my heart still beating in erratic syncopation. Something spread through my body, loosening the vestiges of anxiety that remained after the unexpected meeting with Agatha Wilson. Matthew's nose flared delicately. His smile grew a bit wider. Whatever my body was doing, he had smelled it. What's more, he seemed to have identified it. I flushed. Have a pleasant evening, Diana. His voice lingered on my name, making it sound exotic and strange. Good night, Matthew, I replied, beating a hasty retreat. That evening, rowing on the quiet river as sunset turned to dusk, I saw an occasional smoky smudge on the towpath, always slightly ahead of me, like a dark star guiding me home. All right, so I've got this bumper crop of time with you. I've got until 3:20 to chat with you about all things All Souls. This is the inside scoop on everything I can give you the inside scoop on. And so I want to do a couple of things. I want to talk a little bit about the new book, not the World of All Souls, but the other new book, the continuation of our journey of discovery into the world of All Souls. And I also want to give you a little update on the television. And I want to leave lots of time for questions. And Ed and Huey have agreed that I get to have a mic and walk around. Major high level. I don't need it right now, Huey. I'm good. I'm going to stay up here just until we get through the slides, and then when we do the questions, I'll wander around, and then I will need your help. But yes, high-level negotiations were conducted over the lunch break, so we're all good. So here's the thing. First of all, I want to just say that when I set out to write a book about this world of creatures, I set out to write a single book with 3 parts. It turned out that when I hit page 460 of part 1 of the book, I realized a single book, we were going to need like special carrying cases for it, and that's why it became 3 books. But that I always wanted to write a trilogy, and I wanted to write a trilogy for a lot of different reasons. On the one hand, no one was ever going to read this except for me and my mom, and so I thought it would be really fun for me to like play with different things. So I thought, well, part 1 will be sort of more romancy, and part 2 is going to be more historical, and part 3 will be more science fiction-y. And that'll be really great because I'll learn a lot about writing, and I'll have a lot of fun, and Mom will enjoy reading it. It's all good. So that was for parts. But I also really wanted to see, you know, if I could keep this beast under control. And so it was really important to me, and I tell you, it was hard in writing the Book of Life to do this, but I wanted to have that kind of sense that you get as a knitter, for those of you who knit, when you finally start committing to casting off on your scarf. Your scarf is now 6 feet long, and you could go for another 15 feet. At the end, but at some point you just have to be able to say, that's it, I am done with this scarf. So writing the Book of Life was a little bit like casting off on a knitting project. It turns out my favorite thing in the whole world is dreaming up new characters, and I kept wanting to stick new characters in the Book of Life. Oh boy, so many, like, you know, all Matthew's sisters, every relative who'd ever lived, every bishop, I mean, you know, but there was no way to do that and still cast off and give you a story. So the story of Diana Bishop, Matthew Claremont, and Ashmole 782 is done, right? That is the All Souls trilogy. It was already clear to me writing the Book of Life, and I think clear to a lot, you guys all made it very clear to me during the Book of Life tours that you were not finished with these characters. And so I very quickly realized I wanted to keep going. I definitely needed a break. They're an intense group of individuals to stick around with, and it really, I'm seeing lots of nods in the audience. It is something that if I don't feel it, you don't feel it. So everything you felt reading the Book of Life, I had to feel in order to get it on the page so that you could feel it. And I really did, after the Book of Life, kind of need to have a little moment of being able to have my own feelings and not Benjamin's feelings, Matthew's feelings, Baldwin's feelings, Diana's feelings, the kids' feelings, the whole pack of them. I took a little break, and I just started, when I started writing again, I just started writing up little vignettes and stories and imagining of this and of that and kind of following the characters around. And it soon became clear to me that the way Jean and I both have had dachshund. I used to be a dachshund owner. Jean is a dachshund owner. And I kept imagining it was sort of like having a dachshund race, if you've ever seen a dachshund race, where I felt like all these characters were kind of squirming up to the start line. And then I was like, okay, go. And they all ran in all of these different directions. And what I was eager to see was, okay, which dachshund is going to break free of the pack, right? Right, and go in some wacky direction, and I'll just follow that one. Because that's how I felt, like, as I was writing up these different vignettes, it wasn't like I had a sense like, okay, I'm going to write, this is the book I'm going to write. I just was kind of getting to know these characters after all of the events of the Book of Life in a different sort of way. And so what happened was two people started breaking away, two characters started breaking away from the dachshund pack, and they were Matthew and Marcus. And they were neck and neck for a really long time. And then Matthew broke ahead. And that is when I started talking in kind of concrete terms about a book called The Serpent's Mirror. That is the story of Matthew's time in 16th century England. And it went from his years in the early 16th century under Henry, in Henry VIII's time. And it ended up with just before the events, the shadow of night. And I was trucking along in that story and having conversations, and at some point, somewhere along the line, in the great wonderment that is the interweb, something got uploaded to a computer somewhere, and suddenly The Serpent's Mirror appeared as a title with a release date. Because computers. Because this is how we all live. And that was great until Matthew decided to go on hiatus about 200 pages into The Serpent's Mirror. And Marcus started getting louder and louder. And because it had been sort of uploaded and gotten through the computers and it got out there and people picked up on it, people started talking about it, and it was this thing with a release date. I was like, really? That's when we're releasing that? I'm teaching that. Are we sure? It was out there. Meanwhile, Marcus was still sort of trucking along. And what's happened is that Marcus is now broken out ahead of Matthew. So I know there's a lot of confusion out there. Like, I think every single day I get questions about, like, well, when is The Serpent's Mirror coming out? It says November of 2017. No. If I could find that computer, we would all go take that computer and we would have a ritual burying of the computer that spit that out. And I know I was involved in this, I'm blaming on the computer, but we were talking in lots of hypotheticals and something just kind of slipped through the cracks. But the thing is that you will get The Serpent's Mirror. You will get the story of Matthew and those years in the 16th century. It's just not quite there yet. When last seen, Matthew was in Venice in the middle of the century hanging around. And he's just going to sit there for a little while until I sort things out. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, up pops Marcus. And Marcus starts really telling his story. So what we're going to focus on, and all of your help in this on social media, telling your friends, whatever, would be so greatly appreciated. Is the book that is now listed, bless their hearts, on the computers in places like, various online retail sites and book sites as Harkness, is it like Harkness book to be named? Somebody's seen it, it's like to be determined. Because again, computers. Okay, I promise you that's not the title of the book. It is not Harkness book to be determined later. But we don't have a title that we can all agree on. I thought we did, but it turns out we don't. So I was going to tell you the title of it, and then people were like, maybe not. So one of the things that you need to know is that, you guys are always saying to me, do you have control over this? Do you have control over that? I have no control over my characters at all, as evidenced by this story. I have no control over the covers, and I don't have control over the titles. So those things are very collaborative acts from the characters, kind of me getting in with the characters to the titles to the covers. So at some point, we will all agree on a title, and it will get uploaded to a computer, and it will spit the data into the system, and it will show up, and you know what? You will probably tell me before I know that it's up on the web. This happened with the covers of The Companion. which I didn't think were going to be released, except they were there suddenly. And it was like, great, okay, it's all up. So, so at some point you will know the title to this book. But the book that I am working on, the book that is due to go into production at the end of January, and the book that is due to be in the hands of Tom and other booksellers and you sometime in the fall of 2018, is a book about Marcus. So that is the book. Now I already know what you're thinking. You're thinking, get her that microphone. Get her over here right now. I have a question about this. Let me tell you a little bit about this book. So this actually, I know I told you it was about Marcus, and I'm not lying to you, but bear with me for a minute. Okay, this book is set about 1 year after the events of the Book of Life. So, I have a question from the interwebs, from Amabel Masangay, I'm so sorry if I didn't say that right, from Laguna in the Philippines, and she says, how do you envision the family life for Matthew and Diana? Will there be a book where the twins will be little kids? Yes. It's called the book that's coming out about Marcus in the autumn of 2018, because we pick up 1 year after the events of the Book of Life, and it's the summer. And like all academics, Diana and Matthew have their summer break, and they go back to France to spend the summer back at Les Revenants with the children, with Isabeau down the road. But as usual, when bishops and Claremonts get together, things get a little bent out of shape fairly quickly. And one of the reasons for that is that what's happening also in that summer is that someone very close to Marcus is undergoing her journey of transformation from warm blood to vampire. So you will get little terrifying little Philip and Becca at the age of about 18 months. Okay? You will get Phoebe, and you will get Marcus, and you will get Diana, and you will get Matthew, and you will get Isabeau, and you will get that. You will get to meet Matthew's terrifying sister Freya. And so you're going to spend the summer after autumn with the whole kit and caboodle of them. But as part of what happens that summer is that Marcus tells the story of his journey of transformation from someone growing up in the Revolutionary War period in Western Massachusetts, who goes off to war, who almost dies, who meets this strange Frenchman who becomes a vampire. So you're going to discover at the same time through the tales. You know, I always tell you it's not my tale to tell. Marcus was ready to tell his tale, and he tells his tale as part of the events of that summer when the whole clan is all together. So the story is in the present, the story is in the past, it is woven together. It's a little bit more evenly woven than what you got used to in Shadow of Night, where you had those little kind of like exclamation points of the present interrupting the business of the past. This is a little bit more balanced out, but it's really a way for us to start delving into all of these vampire tales. Because the reality is, you guys, I have file cabinets full of stories I want to tell you. And there's no end. There's no end in sight. Now, I don't know what the computers are going to spit out and how they're going to spit it out and in what order, but I absolutely is that, you know, I really am quite demonic in the creative process. When Colleen was talking about her creative process and how she, you know, that really resonated with me. I don't write from outlines. The outline for A Discovery of Witches was, it begins with absence and desire, it begins with blood and fear, it begins with the discovery of witches. That was my outline. So these things kind of have a life of their own, and I know it can be really frustrating for you guys as readers to be thinking, what is she doing? What is going on? Why is there just no information or misinformation or whatever? And a lot of it is just my fault. It's because of the way I create, which is, is just a very kind of organic thing, and I don't always know where it's going or how it's going to end up. But what I can tell you for sure is that at the end of January, I am going to hit send, and this book is going to go off into production, and it's going to get typeset, and it's going to get end papers, and it's going to get a cover, and it's going to get all of those great things. And then they're going to send me out there to meet you all, and then I'm going to come to a town more or less near you, depending on where you are, and you're going to have this book in your hands, and sort of the next chapter. So it's really what I call it. People say, there was a great question, what is your elevator pitch for the trilogy? Well, when people say, well, what are you writing? I'm like, oh, I'm writing a kind of prequel-y, sequel-y thing. Because that's what I feel like I'm doing, in the sense that I'm giving you a kind of the prequel because you're getting the Marcus story, but I'm sort of giving you the sequel, except that Diana and Matthew are definitely there, and so are the kids, but they're not necessarily in the beginning, the center frame. So somebody said to me, I want a book about the kids. And I'm like, well, I'm here to tell you, they don't do a whole lot at 18 months that we're going to be able to track in the form of a narrative book. But I'm confident they're going to come just from the early signs. I'm fairly confident these two are going to be able to develop into the kind of interesting creatures that we want to follow and for their adventures. So that is sort of where we are in terms of the books themselves. The world is going to continue. The world is filled with lots of really wonderful creatures, and I really want to explore them all. I don't know how I'm going to explore them all. I had so much fun writing those primary sources, for lack of a better word, for Claire, that like one of my fantasies is to give you a book of nothing but de Claremont and Bishop documents. Now again, needless to say, when I mention this to people in publishing, they look at me like I have lost my mind. So I will be playing that part of applause over and over again when I describe this. I think that there's probably short stories to come out, and I think that there's probably also, full books where we really kind of get into somebody like Gallowglass's journey. We get into Baldwin's journey. We get into these various characters. I know. We aren't even going to do a poll of which one you guys all want. We'll see. So I am very definitely working on it. I have been working on it for a while. It's great for me. I'm on a very steep learning curve. I'm not an 18th century historian, but I know lots of 18th century historians, and I've been doing lots of reading and lots of thinking and lots of, oh my God, you people think this is what's going on in the 18th century? I've had a lot of help, and hopefully, again, it will be as exciting for you to discover that world of 18th century life and all of its richness and complexity as it was for me to do it, because again, I may be a historian, but that is not my period, so a lot of it was all news to me. So it's really fun. I think you're going to really get a charge out of discovering more about Marcus and his life and his world. And there's more. There's lots more for me to tell you. So that's sort of where we are in the books. And if you have other questions about that when I'm popping around, don't hesitate to ask them. Meanwhile, in my spare time, I'm not teaching this semester. I will be teaching again in the winter and spring of the year, but right now I have this other little baby that I'm helping bring into the world, and that is the television production. So it's funny, I look at this, there it is, A Discovery of Witches. I walked in because of coming from a publishing world where things like the titles are not in my control. I walked into a meeting, I said, so what is this going to be called? And they all looked at me. And I said, yeah, like, what are we going to call it? And they said, A Discovery of Witches? And I said, works for me. So it is going to be called A Discovery of Witches. That is the name of the television show. And like with Marcus, I am on such a steep curve when it comes to the TV production. TV is not for sissies. I just want to tell you that. These people work such long hours. There are so many moving pieces. I go back to the hotel room and I just think, oh, thank God, all I have to deal with are bishops and declarements. I don't have to deal with all of this other stuff. It is just mind-boggling how something like this comes together. The number of people who have to be in exactly the right time, exactly the right place, and exactly the right mind frame when they say action is just astonishing to me. And so I just want to share with you some photos, some of which you've seen, some of which you have not seen, that have been taken by me, by other members of the cast and crew, in the assistant director's department and the publicity department, et cetera, and just kind of walk you a little bit through. So the first thing is that when we started this program, this television project, we were actually first in a relationship for a feature-length film with Warner Brothers. I was. And then after 18 months, we decided together that this was a project that was simply not going to work in a 90-minute film. We could not smash the book into a 90-minute film. And it was at that moment that I met a woman named Jane Tranter. Jane Tranter was at that time working for the BBC. And she has been executive producer over such things as MI5 or Spooks, as you might know it, in the UK. Wonderful director. She was involved with Doctor Who. She was involved with Torchwood. So this is a woman who has done a lot of amazing television. And she and I just really kind of got onto the same page with what this could be. She's the one who said, really what I think of this is as a love letter to our world. We just felt like our visions for what this could be clicked. So when we first started, it was I'm an executive producer on the set, which means that I am sort of I can advise, counsel, and warn, but I am not holding the camera. I am not holding the typewriter. There is a writer's room with 5 writers in it. I'm not one of them, although I crash their meetings a lot, and they're very nice. But it's again like. Now, somebody is writing episode 3, somebody's writing episode 7, someone's revising episode 2, someone's revising episode 4, so it's a really, really collaborative kind of project. The whole thing is being shot on what is the biggest film studio now in Wales, a place called Bad Wolf Studios, named for something that happens in Doctor Who that somebody else could explain much more lucidly than I'm going to be able to. Somebody said to me when I walked in, well, I guess, if you wrote a book, if somebody named Harkness wrote a book about witches, it had to be filmed at Bad Wolf Studios, which was, for all of you Doctor Who fans, you know what I'm talking about. So this is a picture of Studio 1, which is where we are currently filming. There are, I think, 5 or 6 studios in this space. I have to look at the numbers at the bottom of the hall to be sure. We are the first production to be filmed inside the studios. During a filming day, this entire corridor is filled with the production equipment trucks, all the riggers, all the scaffolding, all the lights and whatever. It's just one gigantic truck. They drive into the studio, park along this runway, and it's just like all of the nerve center for the production. So that's kind of an exciting thing. Preparation for this has been going on literally for almost 2 years, between the script writing, the meetings, signing on broadcasters, getting cast, the cast prepping, Teresa learning how to row. It has really, again, the amount of preparation for something like this to come off is truly, truly staggering. I have no idea what she was doing here. I would not have done that. So I was just really proud of her bravery and also incredibly impressed with her balance, that she could actually get up there and do that. So a lot of our time on the set is, when we're not prepping, we're wandering around, we're chatting, we're sticking our noses into other departments. This is Teresa walking into the art department where they were preparing books for the bookshelves in Duke Humphreys. And there she is in our set of the library, sort of sitting among these handmade book spines, all gilt, all leather, all hand done, and there are literally miles and miles of them. I'll show you another picture of that in a minute. Teresa and I also we had a lot of fun. We went to Cardiff University Special Collections and played with rare books and met things like the book cradle. I know this popped up on one of the on one of the real-time reading questions on social media, what is a book cradle? That is a book cradle. And when she talks about the sort of snaky weights that are on the corners of the manuscripts, we're not allowed to hold books open with our hands. We don't wear gloves, but we're supposed to keep our contact between our fingers and the manuscripts to a minimum. So you use those little snaky weights to actually hold down the pages so that you don't have to hold them. So we went over detailed stuff like that. Again, the kind of you will wander down the hall and suddenly be met with giant boxes full of light bulbs and think, what are these for? Who do these belong to? What department have I just wandered into? Because there's always this little bit of like a magician's factory at work in the TV production. Or you will come into the art department and you will see this, and you'll say, what is this? And they say, that's for Matthew's lab. So apparently that's for Matthew's lab. I think it's a piece of bone. Is that what that's, yeah. So a piece of bone in a petri dish, you're sort of like, oh my gosh. I will tell you that I almost ate a prop the other day. Because again, I just sort of wander, I'm like a grazer. So I'm like wandering the halls, and I walked from one part of the city to another, and there was this entire tray full of little sandwiches and little macaroons. And I said, oh my gosh. And I went like this, and so he said, that's a prop. And so I had to, okay, never mind. So you never know. Sometimes it's so real that you almost make a mistake. So one of the members of our cast, Louise Brealey, who was in Sherlock and is our Gillian Chamberlain, is a wonderful photographer and travel writer. And she's one of our, I call her, my visiting anthropologist on the set, because she's always taking pictures. So these are pictures that she took of the floorboards that they were staining. And she got this great shot. She also got a great shot of miles and miles of the books that they're making for the library scenes, drying out as they're sort of sitting there. We are filming on location in various and sundry places, but for those of you who are well-versed in the books, as you know, a lot of sort of non-Bodleian approved things happen in the Bodleian. And so Richard Ovenden, who is the most wonderful man and the librarian of the Bodleian, had some concerns about which water and which wind and other things entering into the Bodleian Library. And so there are things that we're having to reconstruct for the health and safety of the books. And again, you can tell, we just love taking pictures of these books as they're done and what they're doing to them. And sometimes it just brings a tear to your eye. So this is me in my hard hat. I had just seen something that they were working on, and I could not believe it. And of course, somebody took a picture of it. So that's me crying, because what I was seeing was just such an amazing realization of what I had had in my mind, that I could not believe that anybody would have been taking as much time as they were taking to get it as perfectly as they did. Literally, I saw something, and I recognized the grain of wood. Yeah. When you're down to the grain of wood, they're doing an amazing job. So kudos to the whole crew. So like I said, we are going to be shooting on location. One of the great, really fun things to do is to go out with a film crew on what they call in England a recce. I think here they would call it scouting. And you're in a van with 12 people, and then everybody decants out of this van, and you all run away, and everybody's looking at something else different. So the cinematographer's looking at one thing, the director's looking at another thing. Somebody's got a tape measure out, and they're measuring something else. So we have been to Oxford together as a group. These are some pictures that I took on our recce of Oxford to look at locations. Down into the boathouses. That is actually our prop mistress, Katie, who I said, stop. She was just at the entrance to the boathouse. I said, stop, I have to take your picture. So it just looked exactly like how I imagined Diana in one of the boathouses. Another great shot. I think I must have put that in twice. Sorry about that. So all of these months and months of prep, in some cases years of prep, finally came together for the very first time into what was a read-through, a cast read-through of the scripts for episodes 1 and 2. And so this was our cast read-through. The art department and Katie, who does props, transformed it into a Mabon day. There was this amazing, people had never been to a read-through that looked like this. There were little pine cones with everybody's place names on them. There's scripts sitting in front of it, and we just sort of filled this table. Is that me? That's my script. Teresa's name tag. And we just all sat around and they read through the first 2 episodes. The show is shot in black, which means there's a director who's doing the first 2 episodes, Juan Carlos Medina. There will be a different director doing episodes 3, 4, and 5, and then there'll be a director doing episodes 6, 7, and 8. 8 episodes covers a discovery of witches. Okay, so with the anticipated hope that if there is viewership for it and everybody is as excited as we are, we will go on to do Shadow Night, and we will go on to do Book of Life and subsequent series. What this means is that the shooting is not, we didn't cast the entire thing up front. So some of you are like, where is Isabeau? Well, the answer to that is Isabeau's not in the first 2 episodes. It's the short answer, right? So she has not quite been cast yet because we're into week 2 of filming Block 1, these first 2 episodes. So it was just the Block 1 cast who was in this room, and there we are. So this is the cast and crew. So there's a little bit of a Where's Waldo? Can anyone find Matthew Good in this picture? Yeah, he's all in the back. He's in the back. I don't know if I can, it's just a little thingy. No, that's not. Yeah, where the 2 metal things come together. Hiding out in the back, Teresa and her son, Forrest, in the front and center. The most adorable, she's got 2 of the most adorable children, and all of us arranged together for the cast and crew pick for episode 1. That's Marcus in his plaid dressing gown with his arms crossed there. So yeah, right in the front, yeah, with a big grin on his face. Much tea is consumed in the making of this television program. This is the production office's break room where vast quantities of tea are dispensed to me and to other members of the production team. So I just thought, since we are a group that appreciates our hot beverages, I would show you, if you're ever wondering where's Deb, she's probably right there making tea. The whole production, it's been really an amazing thing to see how a production comes together and bonds together as a family so quickly. So these were actually little gift boxes that were made up for all of the members of the cast to welcome them to the production. And they included, among other things, a dragon. So yes, that is my dragon, who I've named Davy in honor of Hancock. Our Welsh dragon in the series. This is my Welsh dragon. And there's also, we've been really attentive to trying to keep our production good to the earth and not a vast consumer of plastic products. And so we don't have water bottles on set. We have Discovery of Witches water bottles, and they all have got, now they're all covered in like duct tape and people's names, and they have little clips that clip to your belt loops, so you can hear us coming for miles because these metal water bottles really clinking. But these are highly coveted crew objects, and we fill them up from big things of water and have them to keep hydrated. Because sometimes the filming will go from 9 in the morning until 9 at night. Sometimes it'll go from 1 in the afternoon till midnight. Again, this is not for sissies, these really long days. So the production crew works around the clock to make the actors comfortable, to give them places where they can retreat and kind of come down from their performances on what are very long days. These are some of the signs for the trailers. There's Marcus's sign in situ. And there's just this giant, they just park them kind of in a big area, and it's like a little city that just springs up. You pull in at 8 in the morning, all these trailers pull in, all these equipment trucks, the catering truck, the dining truck, tents, and they set up, and then 9 o'clock in the afternoon, there's nothing there because they've just all left and gone back to the studio. So it's an amazing mobilization of resources. We do have We do have chairs, and I did get to sit in the one, I got to pick which one I sat in, and it was Demon. No, I got to pick. They wanted me to sit in which, but I refused. But like trailers, chairs are a really big, they always make fun of me because I have my chair fixation. And the ladies from the All Souls Companion were like, what do you have about chairs? Well, it turns out chairs are a really big deal in TV and movie production. So this is a giant pile of chairs, and chairs do really come with your name on them. And nobody is supposed to sit in your chair but you. So I've been in a tent with people, and they're all standing up, and my chair is sitting empty. And I've been somewhere else, and I come back, and I'm like, why is no one sitting in my chair? And they're like, because it's your chair. So I have a chair, which is really exciting, but feeds my chair fetish. So this is me and the head writer, Kate Brooke, sitting at the bottom of that same corridor. You can see some of the trucks parked and studios 4 and 5 up there, having our photo taken for something. And I think, yeah, we all told Kate she had to sit in the witch chair, that she was the creative witch and I was the demon in this production. There's tons of like little receptacles and boxes going this way, going that way, all of them marked and to keep people organized. But that was to the set because I wanted to show you a little bit of the set. This is what is currently on set 1. And behind that is Matthew's lab. And so I sit outside around these monitors with headphones on, and they're in this little reproduction of a lab, hard at work. They communicate to the world outside, their little set with walkie-talkies. This is 100 walkie-talkies, which is how many that they need every day to be charged up and distributed to members of the crew, all of whom are talking on them and able to communicate. So I sit in my chair and watch the monitors and watch as they're filming and listen to what's going on. And it's a form of alchemy. So we will watch, every day, 9 hours of tape, 9 hours of work might yield an hour and 20 minutes worth of footage. And that hour and 20 gets distilled even further down into maybe what might be maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes on your actual television screen. So I finally, I could not understand this process. And after the first week, I was like, you're alchemists. You take all of this material and you boil it down and you boil it down and you boil it down until it gets to the little bit that is the precious gold that shows up on the screen. So here's a whole bank of monitors when we were out on location in Wales. And I took this picture because that is what it looks like on the set when all the lights go down. They're inside the little box. You're watching the monitors. You could be on the moon for all that you're actually seeing. Yeah, it's not like it's not the chariot races in Ben-Hur that you're seeing. It's like all very, very contained and tight. And again, this was just every day you get a sheet that lists where everybody needs to be, what scenes are being shot, what the weather's going to be, when the sun rises and sunset, so that the cinematographer and the camera people know about the lighting conditions, whether it's going to be cloudy. And on our first day, there was this lovely message from the production crew to everybody thanking them, which again, just kind of gets you into that sense of what it's like, the family side of this production. So this was our first clapperboard for our first ever scene. Since then, the clapperboard people have sometimes gone a little bit mad. So this suddenly showed up for scene 100, complete with antlers and red numbers, and suddenly the numbers are getting bigger. So I love it, that they're all starting to have fun in their jobs and with what they're doing. That was me. You can't really see very much of it, but that is me in Gore-Tex boots, a Gore-Tex jacket, Gore-Tex trousers, and a wool shirt to go out for my 1 p.m. to midnight filming in Wales on location where it rained horizontally for many hours of it. And the lovely women in the assistant director's office said, "What are you wearing to set tomorrow?" As I'm looking at the sheet, and I had cowboy boots and jeans and a t-shirt on. And I said, well, this, and they said, no. You need to go get yourself something to wear. So I came out looking like I was going off to Antarctica, but I needed it, I'll tell you. I needed it so much that the most important thing to me on that day on location was finding the foot heater in the production trailer. So as soon as I found this little switch that said foot heater, I immediately switched it on. Some of the locations that we're using are absolutely gorgeous. The location scouts in the art department, this is one of the scenes that was used for filming the Matthew and Hamish going hunting in Scotland. This is part of the crew going to the set in their Jeep. They had to kind of be jeeped in, and then they ended up walking for 25 minutes with their equipment up the crags. So again, it's sort of a labor of love. Sometimes when you're on location, you're looking at the props and thinking you might want to snack on one of them, and then you take the time to actually look up, and you see something like that, and you just get transported. And so that was a picture that I took because I wasn't able to eat the little cheese sandwich. So I started taking in my surroundings and saw this amazing interior. We were filming at a college in Wales, and it was a beautiful day. And at some point, we were all standing outside, and I looked up, and there was the Welsh dragon flying over us, which I thought was a great omen for our production. That's Teresa outside the same Welsh castle, twirling around and enjoying being Dr. Diana Bishop. And that is a picture that our Hamish took of all of the crew, trucks, and transport in the parking lot on his way into work one day. So there we are, to be continued. But it is an amazing thing to watch the many, many steps and to talk to the very many people, all of whom are really concerned with doing whatever they can do to make the books come alive on the screen in the best way possible. We could not simply sit down and record what's in the books. So we've really tried to be as creative as possible to bring you really good television, as opposed to just a word-for-word adaptation of the book. Some of you are going to hate it, some of you are going to like it, some of you are going to hate parts of it and like other parts of it, and that's all okay, because you always have the books. But this is going to give you something different. This is a Discovery of Witches, the television show. And one of the things to remember is, before I turn over the mic to you guys, is that a lot of our books take place through Diana's eyes. You only know what Diana knows. You only see what Diana sees. But television gives us an opportunity to open up that world. So, when the book starts on the 18th of September and Diana's in the library and she calls up that book, one of the things you might want to be asking yourself between now and the time the television show comes out is, what was Gerbert doing on that Friday night? Where was Matthew? Where was Satu? Where was Gillian Chamberlain? As the television show gets to literally take what was that gradually got wider and wider, and because it's television, we get to go not only through Diana's experience, but we get to take you to the places she could never go in the books, i.e. into these other moments. We know from reading the book, there are other things going on at the congregation, in the lab, in the de Clermont family, in Satu's world, etc. And they're bringing it all to life. And it's been an amazing experience to sit with them and to tell them, they'll say, okay, really, when this was happening in Oxford, what's happening in Venice? I say, well, okay, how much time do you have? And I go through that, and they come away and they're like, excellent, okay. And then I see a script, and I see how they've taken that, what I've told them, and sort of brought it to life and brought it to the page. So I think if, like Diana, you can sort of open up those narrow focus blinders, I think you might have a really good time. And I'm happy to answer whatever questions I can about the books or the TV show, and I'm now, Huey, I'm getting off my podium, I'm taking up a microphone, and I'm going to answer your questions. But once again, I just want to thank everybody in this room and online watching for being with us on this amazing journey of discovery and rediscovery. It's what the All Souls world is all about, and I just could not be more grateful to be on that journey with all of you guys. So thank you so much. excited. All right, is this on? This is on, and there's Ed. And all right, so questions. All right, you're right in front of me. All right, so tell me your name.
Sherry.
Sherry. So I'm going to get a question from Sherry. Sherry.
Your books are so wonderfully anchored in location and place. I tend to even think of the books in parts based on those. And you said you don't write by outline. How did that happen?
Okay, well, honestly, I don't know, but I'm gonna take a stab at it. So because I came to this from a background in history, you know, I've collected a lot of amazing characters and places and things that I think, oh my God, what would X have been like? What would it really have been like to be living in the middle of France in 1099 when the First Crusade was called? What did that feel like, you know? And so when you're sitting in your room, you're typing along and you're thinking, oh, okay, I have this family of French vampires. Wouldn't it be nice if they came from that place where the Crusade started? And then you go and you look it up and you discover it's named Claremont. And suddenly you have a name for a vampire family and you have this place. And it just kind of grows. And sometimes it feels like it grows by magic, and sometimes it takes a lot more time than that. But honestly, I do think that there are very few of us who can say that we travel and we experience other places and other cultures as much as we should. I am guilty of this, right? There are times when I'm just going to stay home, barbecue, and my dog. I'm not going to go anywhere. I don't want to. But the books have really given me a of linger and visit places and bring them to life in ways that I think make us all want to get out there and see the world more. So for me, I have to go to these places and look at them. So Freya, bless her heart, you know, maybe taking me to Denmark in the very near future. You know, I sort of announced I have to go to Denmark soon. And I don't even know why I have to go to Denmark, other than the fact that Freya was in Denmark at some point, and I have never been to Denmark. So I can't write about Freya after a certain point unless I've sort of been where she's been. Does that kind of answer your question?
I know I'm not alone in this, but from the All Souls trilogy, a whole bunch of us have started visiting those places. I have been to a good dozen of them now, and I want to go see the rest, and my girls want to plan a trip just going from place to place in order that we meet them in the books.
You made my day. That's it. But that is seriously, I mean, wouldn't the world be a much smaller and much more wonderful place if we did more of that? Yeah, good. Thank you. All right, yes, I saw your hand come up.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, okay, so tell everybody your name.
My name's Candida.
Candida, all right.
And I wanted to say you've been so successful in balancing your teaching career with your writing career, and I really admire you for keeping your dedication to your writing, to your teaching career. But I'm curious, do you foresee yourself becoming a full-time novelist eventually?
Okay, so first of all, my balancing is a complete illusion. Some days I balance it way better than other days, and I really literally, the thing that brings me down all the time is I can't be in two places at one time. So I cannot be sitting in that chair and in my classroom. It's not fair to the production, but mostly it's not fair to my students. So this fall I'm on leave because I don't have that spell. And then I go back and I sort of, you know, am fully present and focused in the classroom. To be completely honest with you, I've been an academic, a full-time academic since I was 30. I'm 52 now. So I've only been a novelist for a very brief period of that. I can't imagine my life without teaching in it, but I would never say never. I'm kind of like Philippe, you know, never is a very long time. And my file cabinets. Well, right, exactly. And so there might come that moment where I think, really? I now have to address the file cabinets, and it's not fair to my file cabinets and my characters not to sort of spend all that time. I don't foresee it yet, but yeah, I'll keep you posted. Circle back to you guys. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to loop around. Yeah.
Okay, I have two TV book.
Okay.
First, do we know who the U.S. will be?
No, we do. We cannot announce the U.S. broadcaster at this time.
I wasn't sure if we were going to be special.
No.
Okay.
I would love that, but no.
Okay. I know that obviously he's not cast yet and technically isn't into the next book, but if you could, in a perfect world, who would you personally want to play Galaglass?
A good actor. This is not my first rodeo.
Okay, book question. I may have missed it, and I haven't actually looked to see if anybody else. Who was the leak that was feeding the info to Benjamin?
So who was the leak feeding the info to Benjamin? Class? It was Peter Knox.
But he wasn't in their inner circle.
Yeah, but he's still, so I think what happened was there was a kind of thing in a book description that was about a leak, and it took on this weird life of its own, as opposed to it just being that the information about what was going on in that group was getting out and being filtered into Benjamin's hands. The congregation was aware of what the conventicle was doing, so Gerbert, Knox, they were feeding information into Benjamin's hands. It wasn't that there was, I think what happened was leak turned into mole.
Yes.
And a lot of people, and that was never the intention. So, yeah, but good questions, excellent questions. All right, I thought I'll be right back. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, these are all such good questions. Mine's going to seem petty.
No, it's not. There are no petty questions. First, say your name.
Okay, I'm Sheila.
Sheila, okay.
And Marcus is not blonde.
It's not.
I know. I noticed. And does that bother you? Just because there are several, times where Diana looks over and she sees blonde head and dark head leaned in together. So does that bother you at all?
So this is a great question. Honestly, the minute I saw Edward Blumel's tape, I said, oh my God, it's Marcus. I wasn't looking at anything other than his face and hearing his voice. And at some point they said, okay, so how important is it that he be blonde? I said, oh my God, don't touch his hair. So I mean, he has this amazing kind of, and at that point, it became sort of totally irrelevant to me. So I think for me, like Satu has dark hair. And actually what was hysterical was somebody said to me, I said, so, Satu is also dark haired. And they said, well, yeah, she was dark haired. And I said, no, she wasn't. And they said, no, yes, she was. I said, no, I promise you, she did not have dark hair in the books. And so it's amazing to me always that people have already drawn their own, even with the description, people will draw their own pictures in their heads. So honestly, it kind of doesn't bother me. And when you see them next to each other, it weirdly works. They look like father and son in a weirdish sort of vampire-y kind of way. So yeah, so it doesn't, it might have, if you'd asked me a year ago, I might have said, oh my God, there's absolutely no way Marcus can ever have anything but blonde hair. And then, he shows up, he reads, and I'm like, it's all over. That's Marcus from here on out. Yes,
I have a quick one. Hi, yes, hi. I'm Elizabeth Ann. Sorry.
Nice necklace.
Thank you. One of the big...
Oh my goodness. Look at that. Woo. Okay, get behind Elizabeth Ann on the signing line. That's all I'm going to say.
One of the big things in the book is it's so sensory. We have smell, we have sight, we have sound. And when we go to film, we're really cutting that down from 5, 6 senses down to 2. Are we doing anything to overcome that, or how is that going to be incorporated?
It's a great question. So this is going to be one of those places where I think what's going to happen is that the book is going to be better at some things than the television show, and the television show is going to be better at some things than the book. So I think there's going to be a lot that's done with sound to kind of make up for that. And then I also think that it's amazing what can just be done with lighting and the camera angle to kind of give a mood. And so that'll be all the sorts of things that you might hear lines differently or think of a scene differently than you ever have just because of the way it's shot, it's lit, the sound effects behind it, et cetera. And that's got to, I think, again, like that just gives us a chance to see it in a whole new way. But yeah, we haven't worked out the smell-o-vision part of it, unfortunately.
Or the wine.
Yeah, although Matthew Good, you can go on Matthew Good does his own wine show. He is a big wine person, so he'd be all for that, as he said. You know, he's not going to turn down a free drink if it's offered to him. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the kind of thing where it's all going to be about how Matthew drinks a glass of wine to give you that sense that of what he's experiencing, and that's the sort of the magic of acting, in a way. Good question. Good question. All right. Yes, ma'am.
Are we going to hear any more of Fernando's story?
Yes.
Yay!
Yes. So yeah, so one of the great things about kind of going through the characters is I didn't know what Fernando and Marcus's relationship necessarily was. We know that at the end of Discovery of Witches, Matthew really wanted to give the Knights of Lazarus to Fernando. And Fernando said, no way, give it to Marcus. And now I know why. And shortly you will know why. So yeah, you will be seeing Fernando in the book that comes out. Absolutely. Good question. I'm going to head back here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. Okay, so, Rebecca, hi.
Good name.
Thank you. What is the possibility that a third-year university student on the East Coast could take one of your classes next semester?
You would have to become a graduate student at the University of Southern California, unfortunately. But that gives you something to shoot for. The answer is, so I get asked, I'm going to peek around this pillar. Rebecca is behind this pillar. But the question always gets asked, would I do online courses? And honest to God, guys, I don't have the time right now to do that. But if it ever changes, you guys, I know, will be the first to know.
Michelle, kind of a two-part question. In the new book, are we going to be seeing any of New Orleans with Marcus's story? And if so, this is part question, part begging. Can Isabeau and Marie Laveau have some kind of interaction? Please?
Okay. The question about New Orleans, honestly, at this point, I'm not absolutely sure, and that again might just have to do to space constraints. We may not find out as much about New Orleans as we might want until maybe perhaps I spend a summer with Ransom. And it might be that Ransom is the one who really needs to tell us about Marcus's time in New Orleans. Isabeau has not revealed a relationship with Marie, but I will let you know if that happens. Wow! See, you guys have a way better imagination than I have. All right, I saw some other hands over here. I'm going to head this way. All right, I'm going to pass this down. Can you pass this down to your colleague down 2 seats? All right.
Hi, Patricia. Question about the TV show, if you're able to answer it. Will there be any singing?
I don't actually know. I have not heard anyone break into song on the set. There has been no singing in the laboratory. There has been no singing in the middle of sort of hunting stags or going to drinks parties at Oxford, but I will keep you posted. But I haven't seen all of the finished scripts. We're still in, we're really focused on shooting the first 2 episodes, and all of the scripts are in a kind of major collaborative rewriting, rethinking, revisualizing kind of thing. So I don't know for sure. Are you talking about Isabeau singing? Yeah. So there's always, like, weirdly, there are things that I just sort of will put my foot down and say, okay, wait a minute, if we can't do this really well, maybe we shouldn't do it. So one of the things you guys have all got to realize is only going to be seen in your imagination is the yoga scene. So this was a classic example where no matter how many hours we spent trying to imagine how to make that look right on TV, we just kept thinking, this is never going to work. So I don't know what's going to happen with the witch water, is the honest to God answer. But sometimes things have got to go. All right, I'm coming around. Here we go. I'll be back. Okay, I'm coming down this aisle because I know. Hi, guys.
One of my favorite things was the details, like how you said everyone had a specific smell. And I was just wondering how you assigned that to the characters, like how they each were so distinctive and how Diana just so, accurately described how they smelled.
So this is a great question. I have a very strong sense of smell, and I actually associate smells with places. So one of the things I always associate Paris with is burnt chocolate and coffee. You know, the smell of burnt chocolate croissants in the morning and coffee. And I think it's that kind of level of trying to experience the world. And when I would introduce a character, one of the things I would do is, as I was driving to work or, you know, waiting in the line in the supermarket, I'd start thinking, okay, well, what would Diana smell like? And I would do research on sort of the magical properties of certain herbs, plants, whatever, and kind of go from there and start to put it together, because I just thought it would be really cool if people had like a scent smell. And one of the reasons for it was because, not so much Diana, but because of the idea that vampires would have such a keen sense of smell. Like, my dog knows a lot more based on what he smells than I do. Like, he's getting a whole lot of information I'm not. And so again, like that passage I read, I just sort of really wanted to play on this idea that the world was a really different place if you were a vampire. You experience it in a very different way, and one of the ways she did it was through your nose. And I was trying, like sort of what Shelli, to go back to what Shelli was talking about in her talk, I wanted to start building those bridges of connection and companionship and affinity between Diana and Matthew. And one of the ways was this very sharp sense of smell. Yeah, so good question, yes.
What do you like to read for pleasure? If you have time. Never.
You know, because I'm a professional nonfiction reader, I don't read much fiction. I feel like I'm a traitor to the cause for saying that.
I didn't say fiction.
Okay, so but for most of the things I read are for work, so it tends to be very academic nonfiction that I'm using to prepare for class, or reading because a student is working on that project, or indeed I am reading because I am writing a book about Marcus, who lives in the 18th century. So that tends to be mostly what I read. So yeah, I'm terrible for book recommendations. You never want to get them from me.
Hi, I'm Lori Ann, and I just want to know, you talked to us a lot about it's very, your writing just kind of comes to you, there's no outlines. But I just want to imagine, where are you when you're writing? Do you write like at a cafe? Do you write in your den? Talk to us.
So I have different rhythms at different points. My favorite thing to do is to write in my pajamas, which means not as much in cafes. So I tend to write mostly at home. I tend to write mostly in the morning, first thing, or at night, because I need a lot of the white noise of life to come down. So I'm sure that there are other writers in the room, and this is our battle as writers, is how to filter out, you know, there is no milk, the car has no gas, I have to go to a meeting, and then like this whole rich imaginative world we're living in. So I tend to do most of it at the beginning and ends of a day, unless I'm in a period where I'm really, really cruising along. And then I can write anywhere. I can write takeout line at McDonald's, going through on napkins. I can write on the back of my hand, and I'm much less fiddly than I am, you know, when I'm kind of really coming to terms with something. So it's always changing. Like Discovery, I wrote almost entirely in the morning, very early, between like 5:30 and 7:30 in the morning. Shadow, I wrote almost entirely between 10 and midnight. And here's the thing, guys, if you write 1 page a day or 2 pages a day for a whole year, you have a 700-page book. So, you know, that's really all it takes. It doesn't mean you have to be able to sit down and knock 40 pages on that, ever. You know, it's every book, one word at a time and 1 page at a time. And so sometimes I think as writers, we can psych ourselves out. Like if I don't have the perfect conditions and the stars are not aligned, and I'm very guilty of this, like, you know, I won't be able to do it. But you just have to sit your butt in a chair and actually write whenever you can. Or at least that's been my experience. Yes.
Hi, I'm Karen. Can you talk about the moment, if you can remember, or if there was a moment that you thought of the idea of writing this?
I was in Puerto Vallarta on vacation with my mother and my partner and my dad, and we were in a timeshare in Puerto Vallarta. It was early September, and it was monsooning, and there was football and Spanish language programming, which I am not very good at Spanish, on the television. And I had been through the airport and had been struck by how many of the books dealt with paranormal, supernatural kinds of creatures. And that's what I research. And I could not, and I had a lot of time on my hands in monsooning rain with just football on the television. And I started literally thinking, those books are so ridiculous. They all make it look like there are vampires and witches everywhere. Obviously there aren't, because I don't know anybody. Who is these people? And what do they do for a living? And how do they date? And I just kind of kept going. I kept going around like, as a vampire, where do you go on a date? How do you romance anybody? And like all these covers were all of these vampires in hot, sexy embraces with, and I was like, really? And so I couldn't let go of it. And that's where the idea came from, was literally the kind of, for me as a historian of science who deals with like worldviews and how do people put their worldviews together, was I don't get how can this literature be so popular when it is fundamentally impossible for these things to exist? And that's when I started thinking, but wait a minute, what if it was possible? What if it genetically was possible? What if it was geopolitically possible? What if it was possible? Is my neighbor a vampire and I don't know it? So that was what got me going. It started with questions rather than like, to go back to my, I don't write from an outline. It was more like, I need the answers to these questions. Yeah.
So first off, thank you for everything, Deborah. And Reggie, you are not her biggest fan. She's watching. She said
Reggie.
She's your stalker, and I've been stalking her for a lot longer. Will we ever get Isabel and Philippe's story?
Yes, I think you will. How you get it is another. I don't know if you're going to get it in bits and pieces and parts. I don't know if it will be something that'll get pieced together over a long time, or if there will be this moment where suddenly, like with this, it just makes sense that Isabel says, I'm going to tell you what happened. So I don't know. I mean, it'll be great when it happens. I can't wait. Yeah, more time with Isabel is always a good thing. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Hi, I'm Amy. Thank you so much for everything. My question is more directed. It's about the TV show. You said 8 episodes so far. So how long is each episode going to be?
So I think a Sky hour is 49 minutes because Sky has commercial interruptions. So my guess is it's 8 49-minute episodes. But don't quote me on that because I don't actually really know. And there are moments when we sit around and say, do you think we could talk anybody into giving us a double episode? So I don't know. To be continued. But there are moments when we definitely all sit around and think, there's no way we can cram all that into 49 minutes. What are we going to do? So yeah, it'll be fun to see. Yes.
Hi, I'm Ann. So do you anticipate or would you even want to do a cameo appearance in the series?
That's a good question. I've been told this is a tradition. At which point I said I would like to be a slightly plump merchant's wife of middle age shopping in Elizabethan London. And they said, that's not in series 1. So I think, again, like I was just told, I sort of said, and they said, no, this is a tradition. So I don't know. I was not cast as the stag in the stag hunt, for which I'm eternally grateful. So that's as far as I can tell you, but yeah.
Hi, I'm Allison. Were there any real life inspirations for any of your characters? Like you saw somebody in a shop one time and thought that's Isabeau or something?
You know, it's more that there's sort of inspirational individuals. So like I know of, I had a help from a librarian whose name was Lucy in helping do some of the research for the books. And so she ends up as Lucy Merriweather, the librarian in the books. Some of the Bodleian Library staff does recognize certain individuals as described in the Bodleian Library scenes. I was like, you knew who I was talking about? And they're like, we all knew who you were talking about. It does happen. I don't consciously do it, but I think I do sort of just draw on characters that I've sort of known and loved in various ways. And one of the ways I did that was I have some amazingly strong and wonderful female colleagues, and always have across the different institutions where I've taught, and they got pulled into the London Coven scenes, and so the individuals in the London Coven are all fellow female academics that I know and love, and have been really major sources of support and inspiration for me, but not in a way that I think anybody but me and maybe they would recognize. So, great question. Yes.
Hello, I'm Lonnie. Since your characters share your stories as they deem, is there any particular scene or event that stands out in your mind where you kind of went, really? I mean, where you were shocked or surprised or horrified?
Oh, yeah. Surprised when Hamish showed up. Surprised when Gallowglass and Davy showed up. Horrified by Benjamin. No, that was very dark. And extremely happy with the bundling scene, which is the only scene that I wrote from beginning to end without stopping in the middle at any point, and which at the end hardly got rewritten, because I like the bundling scene.
Hi, I'm Caroline. In Discovery, Marcus asks Matthew, will you tell Diana about your children? We only have met, I believe, 2.
That's right.
Are there many more?
Yes.
Will we meet them?
Matthew does have other children. It's an interesting, will you ever meet them? I don't know. I don't know. One of them might come out in this new book. But yeah, Matthew doesn't make a lot of children, but he does, and but he makes mostly male children, and I do know a few of them. I'm not even sure if Diana knows all of his children, honestly. Oh, yeah, I don't know about all of them being made from an altruistic standpoint. Sometimes Matthew's not exactly good on impulse control. That's all I'm going to say.
This is a question from Kate Brown. Kate wanted to know if we were going to find out more about ghosts in either the companion or the next story. She noticed that we had been introduced to vampire and witch ghosts, but she's curious about humans and demons.
Like many of my characters, ghosts just pop up without me sort of knowing why they're there, often at the beginning. So weirdly, there are a couple of ghosts at Les Revenants who are new, but I haven't done a lot of hanging out with them. So I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think at the moment there's a lot of needs in the de Clermont family based on this summer, and so there's not a lot of ghosts around because they only show up when you don't need them. Oh, I have to think about that. I don't know. Which reminds me, though, the mention of Kate Brown has reminded me that I'm supposed to also be answering questions from online. So there's a question from Johnny Turner from Travelers Rest, South Carolina, who says, which character do you see yourself in the most? And it would have to be M. I'm most like M, temperamentally. And then another question I've got here from... Monica Taylor asked, would I consider a follow-up book or novellas? So, Monica, we've answered, I think, your question on that. And Ryan Romaine asked from Wells, Maine, might we learn more about Hugh and Fernando? And the answer is, definitely we're going to learn more about Hugh and Fernando in the new book. Because of our buddy Marcus, I'm going to head down that way after I get to here.
I'm Mary Claire, and we talk a lot about the characters and how I always describe them as indulgent. We know so much about them. One of my favorite characters is the Bishop House, and I was wondering if we would get to see other homes like it, later on, and maybe what your inspiration was for it.
So my inspiration for the Bishop House was that I was living in an early 19th century house that had absolutely a mind of its own. And one night I was sitting and watching television, and I heard this unbelievable scrabbling in the walls, and I thought, okay, what is that? And this is the first house I ever owned. And I was telling friends about it, and they said, oh yeah, they're voles. That was a house that had horsehair insulation, and little critters would get up underneath, burrow through the foundations into the walls and have snacks. And so I just believed I lived in a house that was alive. And so when I was writing the Bishop House, suddenly I had a house that was alive, but in a far more useful way than my house had been. But that, like I say in the book, that the house was built not only with hammers and nails, but also with spells, and I have yet to find another house that is like that. So I think the Bishop House is kind of a special case scenario in its weirdnesses.
Hi, Angela. Given that Bridget Bishop has so much influence on the book, how did you come up with the Bishop idea, and will we see Bridget in the TV series?
I don't know about to go back to Ghosts, I don't know about the status of Ghosts in the television series for sure, so I don't know if you'll see Bridget. I asked a colleague of mine who works in American history, okay, of all the witches in Salem, this was very shortly after the Puerto Vallarta trip, I said, was there anybody in those Salem trials who you think might have remotely been doing anything that looked like witchcraft? And she said, the only possible one, I think, would have been Bridget Bishop. And I was off to the races. Suddenly I had an imaginary witch named Diana Bishop, and the rest, as they say, is history. So, yeah. There you go.
Will you tell us who turns Phoebe?
No, not yet. Nice try.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline. I'm currently getting my master's in sociology with a concentration in criminology, and I'm taking a writing methods class. And yeah, so I was wondering what your revision process is like.
My revision process is painful. I don't have the thickest skin, and so I find revisions really hard. On the one hand, intellectually, I completely know that revision is necessary to excellence. On the other hand, I don't like it. And so I normally have to I really have gotten to the point now where I say, okay, I really want everybody's feedback, and then I need to go have a think about it and try not to be really reactive about it. And that's gotten better over time. I've grown a little bit thicker skin. And it's really true that books get made in the editing and the revision. It's not in that initial flush of creativity where everything that comes out of your fingertips is magic and you love everything and it's perfect. That's not what you read. You read like the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th version of it. And it's really true. That's where books get made. And so you just have to kind of accept that going in. I'm terrible because I will hold on to something until the last moment to postpone the revision, when really if I were, my intellectual side says to me, for God's sake, give them the manuscript and let them tell you what they think of it. But I kind of don't want the magic of it just being me in the book to end, so I tend to hold on. So it's I don't know about you, but for me, it's a really difficult process to go through revision. And I have to have people point out to you something you kind of know, like this does not work. And you kind of know that, but you really hope they don't notice. And then you have to open it up and go back and really deal with it. And so that's, I think that's where the courage of a writer comes. It's not so much about even that morning ritual of going in and doing it every day. It's the revision that is the really serious thing. I'm going to get this and then I'll come over here.
I was sitting here just listening to talk about your revision process and writers, and my experience is that we're in a golden age of female writers right now, and that in the last 20 years, some amazing, wonderful books have been written by females. And historically, it's been mostly men. And, when I first heard about your book, it was from Oprah. And would you say that that was the launching of getting your book out so that people knew about it? I mean, I don't even remember what year it was. And I've read it, the whole series, multiple times, and I find that I'm doing that with several of the female writers because they're so inspiring just to live your life in a way that is kind and seeking and all, it's just amazing what it has done for myself and a lot of people around me.
First of all, thank you. I do think, I don't know, I think there's probably been lots of golden ages of women's writing. It's just that we haven't noticed them because there's a difference between writing and publishing. I think what we're in is a golden age of women being published. I think those stories were always being written and always being told. They just weren't getting into the light of day. And if they were, it was anonymous or it was under a man's name. And so, I really think that's true. And so one of the first questions I was asked was, oh my God, are you going to publish this under your own name? I said, yeah. Because, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go into the publishing closet and not be me. And everybody has to make their own decisions about it. But I do think, there were a lot of people who came. Weekly came out, Oprah came out, Parade magazine came out, Barnes & Noble was hugely behind it. So what was amazing was how many, I think what made a real difference was the number of different voices that said, you know what, this is a cool book if you're a woman and you want to be not only entertained but also enlightened. Give this book a try. And that was such a blessing for me and for the success of the book. So could not have done it without that kind of support, but also the word of mouth from people saying to their friends, I know you're going to think this is ridiculous, but really you should read this book about vampires. So I'm coming over here, just a second, guys.
Hi, I'm Alex. I have a British question. How is Hamish handling Brexit? I mean, someone has to.
I believe he's probably working behind the scenes with Baldwin to make an obscene amount of money while doing some small good at the same time.
Hi, I'm Tori. I'm wondering, as you've been researching and writing the books, is there anything about that process that has influenced how you teach, what topics you cover in your classes?
Good question, Tori. So one of the things that being a first-time novelist in your 40s does for you is gives you a lot more empathy for your students when you're assigning writing assignments and research assignments, because I'm still a newbie at this thing called writing and learning a lot. And so one of the things I think it's made me a better is as a teacher of writing to my students, and not just being like, why can't you understand immediately what I'm asking you to do without further guidance, but instead being like, oh, okay, so where's the problem? Because that's what I need as that's what people have given me, to go back to that revision question, this kind of incredible generosity in terms of, okay, Deb, this does not work for me, and here's why. And so I think that's where it's really made a bigger impact. That, and the other thing is I've just realized, you know what, I'm not the only person who loves old books, and so I'm just going to teach a lot more courses on the history of the book than I've ever done before, because I realize actually a lot of people like dusty old books, and I'm just going to embrace that. So that's changed my curriculum, I guess, in a way.
Sorry, we have time for one more question.
Okay, you get the question.
Hi, I'm Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
My question relates to the audiobooks. First of all, I want to say I'm a huge fan. For those of you that haven't listened to them, Jennifer Ikeda is transcendent, really, in the performance that she gives. Do you think that that's a relationship that you're going to be able to continue in the new book?
I hope so. So Jennifer Ikeda was I listened to, again, many tapes, just like with the cast, I have a lot of opinions, you may have noticed. And so the minute I heard her voice, I knew that she had to be the narrator. And the first question I always ask when I turn in a manuscript, it's never like, when do I have to get things, I always say, is Jennifer free? It's literally the first question that I ask, not the last. And so all I can say is, fingers crossed. I always hope that she's going to be able to do that. And we just have to sort of pray for a clear schedule. All right, so I totally took up all of the time, didn't I? I told you I would. if given the microphone. If I did not get to your question, you're going to see me in the signing line. One thing I just want to say is, don't panic. I'm not leaving the premises until I've seen you all and signed your books. So you can like sit and chillax and drink your water. If there's a huge line, don't worry. I'm not going anywhere until we're all done. So thank you so much for your fabulous questions. And now I'm going to hand this back over. Ooh, I think it's closing this. I'm standing up here. Okay.
So we have one last announcement. Basically, for Karen and I and a few volunteers, the All Souls Con 2018 planning starts tomorrow.
And I get to do the honors of announcing? You get to do the honors.
place
Okay, so we're going to have a birthday party. August 10th, 11th, and 12th, 2018 in Philadelphia. We are going to visit Marcus's World. So just very shortly before that, the new Marcus book comes out. So August 10, 11, and 12, before Diana's Day, come celebrate Diana's birthday with us.
Thank you so much, Deb. And thank you all for coming too.
Stay in touch with us. Oh, by the way, after the signing is done, we're having happy hour. Do not go anywhere until we've met all of you, okay?
And one more round of applause for everyone, all of our presenters, our host, Deborah Harkness, whom without you, this would not be possible. So thank you.
Anyway, thank you again for sharing this with us. Everybody online and everybody in the room, we'll see you next year.
Yes.
And
listen.
Jennifer also has a few
housekeeping.
few more things.
Housekeeping. So just a couple of last minute items. As they mentioned, do not go away after the book signing. We will be forming kind of a neat line for that book signing, and we'll get you organized. Don't worry, beverages are also still available, so please help yourselves to some refreshment, have some really great conversations. Before we get in line, though, we'd like to take one massive group photo of everyone who is here today. This is as much a celebration of our author and her books, but it's also a celebration of you guys. So thank you so much for being here today and participating and asking such great questions. It's been truly inspiring. I do need to let you know that the on-demand video will be available on our website in about 2 weeks. And you will receive a survey about your event today. And the questions are really important because, as we've just mentioned, next year's con, we want to do it even bigger and even better. So your feedback is going to be really important to making that happen. And also, yeah, make sure you meet us for happy hour. We can all grab a drink in the NOPSI bar and have some fun.
And if you do, if you forgot copies of your book, want more copies of your book, want copies of Richard's book, want copies to give as gifts, Tom from Octavia Books is sitting over there with lots and lots of books. I've pre-signed some of them. I have the same pen with me. So if you get one of them, you say, oh my God, but it's already signed. Don't worry, I can still personalize it. I have the same pen. So we're all set, and you can go see Tom if you need any more books. So, perfect.